You are one of the last people alive, and the most dangerous thing in the room may be your own family tree. Not because people are evil or stupid, because survival has rules written into biology. Too few unrelated parents, too many shared genes, too little room for one bad year. Earth is not empty because it is safe. Earth is empty because it has become a trap. By the end, you will understand why 2 people are not a real restart button, why 100 people may still be frighteningly fragile, and why the honest answer is not one magic number. The survivors were not always the strongest. They were the ones who could keep options open. Imagine a small camp before civilization, smoke twisting into cold air, children asleep near a fire, and every adult carrying skills the group cannot afford to lose. For most of human history, people lived in small bands, but those bands were rarely sealed off forever. They met neighbors, exchanged partners, traded objects, and kept genes moving across landscapes. Isolation is the real enemy. Researchers studying population genetics discovered that a population is not measured only by how many bodies are alive. At first, they thought a head count was enough. Then they realized that the crucial number is often the effective population size, the number of people actually contributing genes to the next generation. If one powerful person fathers many children while others have none, a camp of 500 can genetically behave like a much smaller group. That is why conservation biologists revised the old 50/500 guideline toward roughly 100 effective breeders for short-term inbreeding risk and 1,000 for retaining long-term evolutionary potential. But those are broad conservation rules, not a permission slip to rebuild humanity with exactly 1,000 people. And that is only the first problem. Researchers also discovered what happens when a population passes through a bottleneck. At first, they thought population growth would quickly erase the danger. Then they realized that growth can multiply people without restoring the genetic variants that were lost at the beginning. A group can become millions of descendants from only a few founders, while still carrying a narrowed genetic deck. Genomic research shows that human expansion out of Africa involved repeated founder events, with genetic diversity generally decreasing farther from Africa. That does not mean those populations were doomed. It means every departure, disaster, and isolated settlement carried a genetic cost. A future survivor community would face the same arithmetic, only faster, and with no neighboring populations left to reconnect with. Now the question becomes much darker. Researchers studying inbreeding found that the danger is not a cartoon curse that instantly destroys every child. At first, they thought the problem was simply bad genes. Then they realized the risk comes from relatives sharing copies of rare, harmful recessive variants. When close relatives have children repeatedly, the chance rises that a child receives 2 copies of the same damaging variant. Small groups can also lose useful variation by pure chance, a process called genetic drift. One lineage may survive a drought. Another may be more resistant to a new infection. If the lineages disappear early, their advantages disappear with them. So a tiny population is not only fighting the genes it has, it is fighting the genes it no longer has. And biology is still not the biggest threat. Researchers studying human evolution found that ancient humans survived small numbers through connection, not isolation. At first, they imagined prehistoric groups as separate little tribes wandering alone. Then they realized archaeological materials often reveal movement, exchange, and social networks across surprisingly long distances. Stone, shells, pigments, and other materials traveled beyond the places where they originated. Those connections mattered because people could exchange knowledge, resources, and marriage partners. A survivor population on an empty Earth would have no outside network. One epidemic, one failed harvest, one flood, or the death of the only midwife, mechanic, farmer, or engineer could collapse years of recovery. A viable population needs more than DNA. It needs living memory. Then comes the most uncomfortable number of all. Some genetic studies have proposed that ancestral humans experienced an extreme bottleneck around 930,000 to 813,000 years ago, with an estimated effective breeding population near 1,280 for a long period. At first, that sounds like proof that a few thousand people are enough. Then researchers challenge that interpretation, arguing that the genomic evidence does not clearly support such a simple, severely bottlenecked single population. The debate matters. Ancient effective population estimates are models of deep history, not a blueprint for a future emergency. But both sides agree on something important. Human history was shaped by bottlenecks, structure, movement, and recovery over immense spans of time. A modern restart would not have those easy chances. Imagine knowing every possible future partner is your cousin. Imagine losing one person and losing the only person who understands childbirth. Imagine watching a storm destroy the one field that feeds everyone. How many people would you want beside you then? The hopeful part is that humans have always been more than isolated bodies. We are teachers, caregivers, planners, healers, and storytellers. Cooperation is humanity's greatest weapon. Your brain still searches for community when danger rises. Your body still remembers that safety once meant other people near the fire. So what is the smallest population needed to repopulate Earth? Not two. Not a clean, universal number. The honest answer is a large, genetically diverse, carefully managed community, likely in the thousands of unrelated people, for a far more realistic margin of safety, with many more needed for resilience, skills, and recovery. We cannot know every detail of what happened, but the science underneath is solid. Honestly, I think this is what makes the story so human. To rebuild the world, you would first have to rebuild the circle around the fire. A number alone cannot save you. Imagine 1,000 people surviving. It sounds like a lot, but how many are children? How many are too old to have children? How many are injured? How many know how to grow food? How many know medicine? How many know how to repair a water pump, deliver a baby, preserve seeds, or make clean tools? A population can be genetically large enough to continue, and still be practically too small to survive. Researchers studying early human populations learned that survival was never just about staying alive today. At first, it may seem that food is the first problem. Then they realized that knowledge can be just as important as food. A single skilled person might know where water stays during drought. Another might know which plants are safe. Another might know how to stop a wound from becoming deadly. If those people die before teaching others, the group loses more than one life. It loses a library. This is why ancient human communities mattered so much. People passed survival information through stories, gestures, practice, and memory. A child watching an elder shape a stone blade was not simply learning a skill. They were receiving a message from the past. Do this, or you may not survive winter. Researchers also found that small ancient groups were not always genetically isolated. At first, a camp may look like one separate family. Then genetic evidence can reveal movement between groups, new relationships, and distant ancestry. Even Neanderthal groups appear to have had social structures that shaped how individuals moved between communities. That movement mattered. New people brought new genes, but they also brought news: where the animals were, where the river flooded, which cave was safe, which group could help when food disappeared. On an empty Earth, every one of those connections would be gone. No distant camp, no new marriage partners, no neighboring hunters arriving with different skills, no one coming over the hill with a better idea. And that is why the safest answer is not the smallest group that can have children. It is the smallest group that can remain diverse, organized, healthy, educated, and connected for generations. That is much harder. But it also reveals something powerful. Humanity did not conquer the planet because one person was unstoppable. We did it because people learned to become more than one person.